Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be chatting with you.
Right on. So let's dive right in. There's a story that I wanted to start with, which I've heard before, and I think is a great one. And it's basically, for the most part, you grow up playing soccer most of your life, right? And then
hmm
in high school, your high school football coach actually approaches you. Um, Tell me about that story and how it all unfolded.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty common story for many place kickers at all levels of how they really got their foot in the door. No pun intended there. But yeah, like you said, grew up very competitive soccer player my entire life. Since I was 5 years old. Always thought of that as my primary sport. Um, you know, Played club at a relatively high level. Played, high school. High school team was pretty good. Was able to start as a freshman at my high school, and was like going into my junior year as a captain of the team. And all of a sudden, next thing I know, I get a tap on the back of my shoulder from the high school football coach, who was also a teacher at the school. And yeah, I guess he had asked around to some of my friends who were on the team of which kid on the soccer team had the strongest leg, and they all said Andrew Samson. And so he asked me if I wanted to kick, and you know, it was really kind of a no hesitation answer that I would be interested in doing it. And the reason why is actually, fun fact, my dad is probably the most unathletic person I know, but somehow he raised three collegiate athletes. Besides myself, both of my older brothers played Division III college athletics. One played um, soccer and lacrosse, and the other one
Yep.
played baseball and was also a punter on the football team.
Wow.
And so growing up with them and just kind of being around soccer and kind of always there, there's a football line around after soccer practice and whatnot. I knew that I could go out and pretty consistently hit a 30, 40-yard field goal
Yeah.
without really any technique or knowing what I was doing. But, for me and growing up in the state of Michigan, soccer and football are both in the same season. They're both in the fall, which is true of many Midwest and East Coast states. In California, where I am now, I think one's in the fall, one's in the winter. So
Right.
I guess a kid now could do both. But my only rule with the high school football coach, Coach Sugg, was if there's ever a conflict, I'm going to soccer. And he said,
Yeah.
that's cool. Never come to practice. Only show up for the games on Friday nights. And so that's what I did. I never went to football practice. I never practiced with the team, never did anything, and went to soccer. And sometimes on a Friday, I would leave soccer practice 30, 40 minutes early, go to the locker room, get all my stuff, which was, my pads and a uniform, and hop on the bus, go to the football game, put them on, and go and kick in the game. And,
That's incredible.
again, this is with zero technique, really knowing what I was
Right.
doing. I was just strong legging it, basically. Um, but what was really interesting and kind of this major inflection point for me that came when I knew that I could do this potentially at a higher level. My very first game, my junior year of high school football, our our quarterback was actually Steve Mariucci Jr. So if you remember Steve Mariucci, he
Sure
is
do.
now on the NFL Network, but
Right.
he was also a longtime San Francisco 49ers coach and was also the coach of the Detroit Lions at the time. His son was my classmate in high school, right when he was coaching the Lions. And so Steve Mariucci, the coach, is at my first game. My first game, I drill a 40-yard field goal, like with distance, like crushed it. I guess it was like, just good vibes, good energy, a lot of
Yeah.
adrenaline. First game out there. And Coach Mariucci comes up to my dad after the game and he says, your son should really start taking this seriously. He could play at the next level.
Yeah.
And it was there that kind of a light bulb went off for me of like, okay, yeah, maybe this could be a thing because, I was very focused on academics. Soccer was
Yeah.
obviously my primary sport,
Yeah.
but it allowed me to kind of think more seriously about it. Still, soccer being the primary sport where I was only going to soccer practice and never going to football and only
Yeah.
kicking the games on Friday, but it caused me after my junior year wrapped up to attend some camps and kind of get on more of a national circuit in terms of kicking, which surprisingly seems very niche, but there's a lot of things out there in terms of college football, of course, being the business that it is. And this is now,
Yeah.
back in like 2005, it was a different business than it is today.
Yeah.
Um, but I had always wanted to, really focus on academics. And if football was going to happen, then great, that would be a
Yeah.
bonus. And
Right.
so I ended up having a really successful senior season as well, and ended up starting to get mail and letters and reached out to from hundreds of schools, ranging from big time D1 programs like the University of Michigan all the way down to smaller Division III schools. But for me, like I said, academics was always, the biggest thing. And so
Yeah.
the Ivy League schools, were pretty heavy recruiting me. And the
Okay.
University of Pennsylvania was always my number one choice school, regardless of football. And they ended up offering me the opportunity to kick on the team. In the Ivy League, there's no scholarships. You'll still need to
Right.
get into the school. And, they, of course, require good grades and all those things. But to have an opportunity to step in and, be part of the team at Penn was a dream. I
Yeah.
always thought of myself as a football player who, or really as a soccer player who happened to play football. I was never a football player who used to play soccer.
Right.
I still don't really consider myself a football player. I was just a soccer player who happened to kick because I never felt contact my entire
Yeah.
life. And we can talk more about that. But yeah, I mean that's the story. Again, pretty typical, but it was certainly something that kind of just clicked in the very later stages of my high school, time.
Right.
And there was kind of no looking back after that first field goal, and it
Right.
kind of took off from there.
Yeah. So I'd love to go back to that first field goal because what is going through your mind like as you're preparing for that first game, to your point, throw on the pads, get on the
Yeah,
bus, no practice, you go out and you crush a pretty long distance field goal. Like
yeah.
what's going on in your
Well,
mind at that
I
point?
think my mindset in terms of how I approach kicking evolved drastically after that. I think
Right.
for this first kick, it was just like I'm gonna run out there and I'm just gonna kick this thing as hard and as far as I can.
Yeah.
So, I think again, part adrenaline, part excitement,
Yeah.
part probably trying to impress some girl in the stands. I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, it ended up kind of being that light bulb moment again. And,
Yeah.
I think from there, once, kind of had that conversation with Coach Mariucci, it really, I think, made me even more focused on it, and more serious about it. And, I think as a kicker, it's obviously a high risk, high reward type position. That's something,
Right.
I'll talk about my college coach used to always say. But,
Right.
I think not having the pressure of, oh yeah, I need football for a scholarship, or, I think I had this, mindset the entire time that again, football was a bonus because
Yeah.
I wasn't going to go to college to play soccer either.
Right.
Maybe I could have, but probably not at a school like a Penn or like a Michigan or anything like that. And I ideally wanted to go to those, academically. So again, there was really kind of no pressure in a pressure situation,
Yeah.
which allowed me, I think, to be a lot more calm, cool, and collected about it. Which, of course, as a
Right.
kicker, or if anyone's played golf, it's the same exact thing. You have to have that mentality every time you go out.
Yeah. So as eventually you get recruited, you go to Penn, what sort of development from a place kicker standpoint happens, let's call it, from in those latter years of high school to your freshman year at Penn? Like what's that
Yeah,
development
I
look
mean,
like?
I think it's a lot. It's a lot of some of the camps that I went to and some of the coaching that I had. I mean, it was relatively lightweight because I think again, you're kind of just looking at what the pros do, right? They're taking three steps back and going two steps over, and they're kicking the ball.
Yeah.
And so I think there was like some pieces with, your plant foot has to be here. You want, your weight on this foot. You want, kind of a leg swing to go up and through the ball. Um, you know, Thinking about the wind, thinking about the snap, thinking about all these other things that kind of come into play. So it's not just, oh yeah, let's go out there and boot it, like maybe that first field goal. But again, you don't want to overthink. You still have to have kind of this mentality that you have to treat every kick individually. You can't let
Yeah.
your last kick impact your next one. And if you have a great kick, you can't think that your next kick's also going to be great. Everyone is individual. Um, and so I think it was, some of those things. But in high school, it was, again, such a different environment. It was really, I think, when the pressure started to pick up with being in the collegiate environment around, with a lot more pressure around me, that I think really helped me change my mental focus around it.
Yeah.
Physically, I really don't think much changed. I probably, got stronger and more mature with, just my body and my overall technique. But I think it was really more the mental aspect than anything that
Yeah.
really evolved.
Right. So can you talk a little bit about what mentally evolved for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, when I got to Penn, there was Penn had actually set an NCAA record the year before I got there for losing three straight games in overtime because of missed extra points and field goals.
No way.
And so they were pretty heavy on recruitment of place kickers. And so besides myself, coming in as a freshman, kid from Michigan, the Midwest, they also recruited a kid from a massive Catholic football high school in New Jersey and a kid from Los Angeles from Beverly Hills High School in California. And so they had a West Coast kid, an East Coast kid, and a
Yeah.
Midwest kid, hoping that I think one of the freshmen would pan out, right?
Right.
And the kicker who, had missed all the kicks the year before, he was actually going into his senior year and knew that he probably wasn't going to have an opportunity to play. There was a few other kickers on the roster, I think, sophomore, maybe another freshman. And we all kind of came to camp on, an equal playing field. And it was really kind of a competition to see, who was going to win the job. Interesting enough, I was the last of the three kickers to be recruited and offered. The one in New Jersey was really brought in for field goals. The one in California was really brought in as a kickoff specialist. And I was actually brought in probably more as like a hybrid punter and kicker. I also punted in high school, but punting was definitely not my primary thing, but I was decent at it. And probably to like figure out if I could support or back up either of them. And, we get to preseason camp and it's, now you're stepping foot at, still a Division I school in a stadium that seats 50,000 people. Granted, we never had that many people in the stands, but
Yeah.
cool to dream about it. And, you're playing with the big guys and it was just a very different environment. But again, I had light expectation because
Yeah.
I was the third guy brought in. I actually started punting when I got there, and they had a senior punter who was all Ivy League. He was really good. I knew I wasn't going to punt, but I was punting, and I wasn't even kicking field goals. And then the guy who was there the year before, he was kind of out of the picture. The sophomore was kind of out of the picture, and the two other freshmen, one of them ends up getting injured, and then one of them was a bit more kind of erratic and kind of hit or miss on his field goals, and so they had me start kicking field goals. Probably, I want to say, a third of the way through preseason camp. And about 3 or 4 days after that, they never had me punt again. I was only doing field goals now, and
Right.
kind of the path was paved for me to win the job. And I think again that was really the mentality that I had.
Yeah.
But obviously, there's some physical elements too of being able to hit field goals. But really, the mental aspect of just being cool and calm under pressure in any situation, in any environment. Even when they put you out there in a game situation and you got all the big guys literally this close to you yelling in your ear, and you go
Yeah.
out and you hit it so everyone doesn't have to run sprints after. I mean, that gives you confidence.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was really interesting, kind of how all of that went down. And what's great is, despite the fact that it was a competition, both of the kickers who were my year, the one from New Jersey and one from California, are two of my best friends.
Yeah.
The one who was the kicker who ended up getting benched was there every step of the way, supported me the entire season, despite all of that. Still keep in touch with him,
Right.
And so to have just a teammates like that also
Right.
shows you the value of being a great teammate in any situation, despite the fact that if things don't work out for you the right way, that just helped me understand, hey, no matter what, they're great teammates to me. I need to be great teammates to them too.
Right.
So, that's where it kind of all took off. And yeah, I ended up starting, the first game of the season as a freshman.
That's incredible. So you kind of have we'll get to your career highlights in a minute. We don't have enough time to read off all of them. Um, but when you think about or you reflect upon your 4 years at Penn and from kind of the freshman year aspect of things which you just talked about, what are I don't know, what are some of the kind of the ups and downs of your journey there, right? I mean, for any of the collegiate athletes who are listening, current athletes, former athletes, we've all been there, right? We all have the moments of the highs and the lows. Like, what comes to mind for you? Maybe we'll start with sort of the highs.
Oh, the highs. I would say let's maybe start with the lows because I think it
Okay,
provides
let's
some
do
good
that.
perspective. Well, I went 0 for 2 in my first ever game and hit my first field goal off the upright. So there's that. So luckily it led to a lot of highs after that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think you know, freshman year of college often is tough for many, many people. It's an adjustment. People moving away from home, having to deal with, kind of creating your own schedule
Yeah.
and the rigors of academics and all of that, especially at a school like Penn, right? That's no cakewalk. And they're not giving any special treatment to football players by any means.
Right.
And I think what was really hard for me, and it's also, I feel super fortunate that I was the only freshman to be starting. Um, but that meant that I didn't really get to experience a lot of what my classmates experienced in terms of like it being the first year, of college, first semester of college. And so that's little things, but things that, social things, being able to go out to a party on a Thursday night,
Yep.
because they weren't playing in the game on Saturday. There was none of that if you were playing. And
Yep.
so it really, I think, kind of made me feel a bit isolated. And obviously, when you're a kicker and you're a freshman,
Right.
kickers are isolated anyway. You're a kicker and you're a freshman on a team with a bunch of upperclassmen, you're even more isolated. I felt very, very alone the
Yep.
whole time. And, it was a pretty rough freshman year. I think I maybe hit 50% of my field goals, something like that.
Yep.
I thought about transferring after my freshman year,
Wow.
or first semester of my freshman year. I think I came home over Thanksgiving after the season ended, or for winter break, and I said I just want to go back home. I want to go to transfer to University of Michigan. I don't care about football anymore. All my
Yeah.
friends were going there. They were all having a great time. I was like, I want to do that,
Yeah.
and I didn't. And that was the right decision for me. Probably, arguably, the best decision I made not doing that. And I came back, and really persevered and pushed through, that second semester. And then I think that set me up for, what was a really transformational sophomore year for me,
Yeah.
where I ended up, setting a bunch of records, including, having the single season record for most field goals in a season at Penn, highest ever single season field goal percentage. Was named a third team AP All-American after the season ended.
Right.
We ended up not just coming a couple games short of winning the Ivy League championship, but um, you know, it was a complete 180 from my freshman year in
Right.
in every way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And I ended up, talk about a highlight. We played one of our, I guess every team in the Ivy League is somewhat of a rival, but Yale was really good at the time, and we ended up beating Yale at the Yale Bowl at Yale 9-7,
Wow.
which was a pretty, I think, turning point win for the
Right.
program. And the 9 points were because I had three field goals. And
Wow.
so single-handedly, I outscored Yale and we won the game. And my
Yeah.
last one was with like 3 or 4 minutes left in the game in the fourth quarter. And so that to me is like the biggest, kind of individual highlight,
Right.
for sure. Team wise, we won back-to-back Ivy League championships my junior and senior year, and we were undefeated both seasons. Tremendous teams. Um, we scored a lot of points, so
Yeah.
it made it easy for me to rack up the points. And I think my biggest accomplishment at Penn is still being very fortunate that I'm the all-time leading scorer in the history of the program, and that comes from again being on good teams, but also starting for 4 years, being really lucky to be healthy for 4 years, playing in every single game, not having injuries that prevented me from playing, and having an incredible support system, not only from my teammates and friends, but
Right.
my parents, who would basically fly out for every single home game,
Yeah.
which is I owe so much to them for all things in my sport career, my academic
Right.
career, and even kind of who I am today is now as a dad too. So that was it was a transformational experience to do that, and I feel very fortunate to be put in the positions that I was and to have the success that I did, because I know it's rare, and
Yeah.
I'm happy I was able to to have some element of success in doing it.
Yeah. That's great. I was sleuthing on your Penn bio, and it's like all-time leading record holder. It's like the whole thing. It's like those are like every other word. So it's
Yeah,
it's
well,
it's super
again,
impressive.
you're nothing without a line protecting you, a good snapper, and
Right.
a good holder. So yeah,
That.
never felt any contact, all 4 years.
Yeah.
Got a couple blocked here and there, but that happens. But yeah, I never got tackled. My mom was happy about that for sure. And it was a good time.
Yeah, right on. So when you that moment when you went home your freshman year, I was curious about this when you said and you were like, "Hey, I don't know, I just might pack it up, transfer to Michigan. My friends are having a great time there." What what was it that got you to go back to Penn?
I think I kind of forced myself to, but then it really just allowed me that second semester to kind of not have football every day. Of course, we
Yeah.
started getting back in off-season workouts and spring practices and all of that, but just was able to find a different friend group outside of football too. And
Yeah.
it just, and I just became more settled in with the school and kind of the
Yeah.
routine and the classes and the workload and all of that, which I think again is probably very typical of many people, and I'm sure there's countless others who've had similar experiences. That first semester where it's just a life shock,
Right.
and
Right.
especially again with the pressure of the academics of Penn and the pressure of playing
Yeah.
high level Division I football, as in a high pressure position. It was a lot. So yeah, I think it was part probably telling myself that I could do it, part my parents saying you have to do it. And me just I think being confident and just like I was on the football field, probably putting myself out there a little bit more and trying to get some a new friend group and
Yeah.
experience some different things that I wasn't necessarily able to experience that first semester because of football.
Right. Makes sense. And so, fast forward back to your, senior year, it's, so many great things going on, certainly at a team level. It sounds like you kind of found your stride in so many ways, a lot of good stuff there. When did it start going through your mind that, okay, it's going to be over soon? Football, that is.
Well, interesting enough, I feel very, very lucky again. Penn is an outstanding school. I was in the Wharton School of Business, which is one of the top undergraduate business programs in the country, and they do so much to, you know, help with career advice and placement and all those things. And so,
Yeah.
going into my junior year, I was actually an intern at PepsiCo, a marketing
Ah,
intern there. And so that was, a marquee kind of internship that I was able to land. Had nothing to do with football at all. But, of course, a lot of big companies come to Penn to, recruit kids for jobs. And so I had a really great internship experience at Pepsi. And then Pepsi also owns Gatorade, which of course is an iconic sports brand. And for me, being at Pepsi at their headquarters in New York, which is where most of the soft drinks are based,
right.
I kind of voiced early on in that internship that if there was an opportunity for me to come back full time after I graduated, I really wanted to be working for Gatorade, which was also headquartered in Chicago. Back in the Midwest where I was from originally, Chicago kind of being the marquee city for all of us Midwesterners.
Yep.
And you're obviously there now.
Yep.
And I was fortunate to get an offer to come back full time, and they were able to transition that offer from Pepsi in New York to Gatorade in Chicago. And so, again, just to have the opportunity to kind of follow my passion and be able to do that was amazing. Again, very lucky, very rare. I got
Right.
that job offer the day before classes started my senior year.
Oh,
So I
wow. So
already
you
knew
knew
my
that's
entire
amazing.
senior year that I had an incredible full-time job lined up after college.
Right.
Um, I had a pretty light course load my senior year as well. Ended up staying one summer at Penn, and took some extra courses there and whatnot. And so after my senior year, again, set all these records. Already had a job lined up. Again, talk about like no pressure, really easy. Had like two classes my second semester senior year.
Yeah.
I actually got approached by an NFL agent.
I was going to
Um,
ask you that. I was like, was
yeah,
pro ever on the table?
it was. So I signed with an agent.
You did. Wow.
Yeah. And what was interesting though is that this is in 2011. In 2011, there was the NFL lockout. And
Right.
so it became very difficult, and it was very difficult for a kicker from a small school to get on any sort of radar of any NFL coaches because NFL teams
Yeah.
could not come visit schools, couldn't meet with people. It was like shut down.
Yeah.
And so, again, similar to high school, wow, this would be the ultimate bonus because either I'm going to go play sports or I'm going to work in sports. And so
Yeah.
for me, again, that became somewhat low pressure where football was such a bonus. And I again feel, and I'm sure some of your listeners or some people you've had may think like this, some may not. I had a really fulfilling college experience,
Yeah.
coming off of two Ivy League championships. Like I
Yeah.
ended my last game senior year, as a record holder,
Right.
hoisting up a trophy, getting a championship ring, hitting my last ever field goal. I was fulfilled. And
Right.
so I kind of was okay, honestly,
Yeah.
being done. And again, that took pressure off of, okay, now this is a bonus. Yeah, I got 2 classes, I got some free time. I have an agent, he got me a bag of NFL football, so he got me some, indoor training facility in Philly. I'm gonna go kick there, a couple afternoons a week, and
Yep.
the coaches, who I obviously still have good relationships with at Penn, let me go work out at the gym and do my thing. Awesome. Um, so it was never really probably a reality that it was going to materialize, and it didn't end up materializing, which is okay.
Right.
Probably the circumstances of the lockout made it harder. I don't know if it wasn't the lockout, if anything would have materialized. I had some success at Penn. I think there's a lot of other kickers who are way better than I was that were out
Right.
there. But yeah, I was content, honestly,
Right.
and I felt confident in that, in being content. And I think part of that had to do too with the fact that, I had this safety net of, a job that I was
Right.
going to be really excited about already lined up, which again is super rare. A lot of the things, that have fell into place for me, knock on wood, have been really fortunate. And, there's other podcasts where is it luck or hard work? And, I think it is
Yeah.
definitely, it's definitely both for sure. But, I worked really hard, and then, kind of put myself in the right opportunities and was able to capitalize on them. And that, I think, is, kind of also is representative of my career after
Right.
football too.
Right. So you go start at Gatorade, and you've mentioned before that in that role during a very formative time, you were working with some of the best and the brightest people.
Yeah,
Spoiler
including
alert,
yourself.
we did work together at one point
Yep.
there, but
Yeah.
um, tell me about working for and at, one of the, I'd say one of the world's most iconic sports brands as your first job.
Yeah, well, when I was at Penn, as part of the business school, I concentrated in marketing and management, which actually at Penn is pretty rare. Most people are in finance and want to be investment
Yeah.
bankers at Goldman Sachs, right? And work on Wall Street. And so that was already rare for me. But I also was, not passionate about numbers and finance, and I wanted to, kind of follow my passions. And I'd always been interested in kind of brands and marketing and consumer behavior, and was always inspired by, Nike ads that I would see on TV, or of course iconic Gatorade ads.
Yeah.
And that's just what I always wanted to do, was marketing. And so to come in and be at a place like Gatorade, which is again part of PepsiCo, to have that CPG background, to understand kind of the ins and outs of that, to be in a structured environment like that, to be around, the level of talent internally and then externally, Kyle, like yourself, pretty amazing. And, when I was at Gatorade, I had a variety of roles there. Started off just when we worked together, doing this retail activation role, which
Right.
was really interesting because I think, as a first, role within an organization like that, how Gatorade shows up in store and on shelf is, kind of the most important thing, right? Because that's ultimately what's going to lead someone to make a purchase amongst the sea of other choices that are out there. And
Right.
so to be able to work on that and kind of, understand what it takes to sell a product, when you have like 2, 3 seconds to capture someone's attention was awesome. Great place to start. And then from there, my role kind of really evolved into other things. Gatorade was kind of doing some interesting stuff around the sidelines at the time. So,
Yep.
the orange carts and green squeeze bottles you see
Yes.
on every NFL and NBA and MLB
G
dugout,
series.
whatever. Yeah, all of it.
Yeah.
They were trying to kind of reinvent how they showed up for the athlete. And maybe because of, my background as an athlete, but also kind of the role that I was in, and the leader that I reported to. I had the opportunity to work on a lot of innovation around the sidelines, across a variety of sports, not just American sports, but sports like, soccer and cricket, and all these things that are big globally, as Gatorade was really trying to expand. That then turned into, some other innovation roles around some of the stuff that they're actually doing now, then that Gatorade's commercialized, around customization and, testing your sweat to know if you need more electrolytes or less electrolytes. And I was like kind of early stages of that. This is now back in like 2013
Yep.
with the Brazil national team for soccer, ahead of
Right.
the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. She was doing like crazy stuff,
It's
to be
amazing.
like 23 or 24, whatever I was, and like going to the World Cup. And
Yeah.
it was a dream job. And then, the role kind of continued to become more of a dream job, managing these big time global soccer properties,
Yeah.
Lionel Messi, Liverpool, FC Barcelona. I was traveling to Europe every 6 weeks to go to these
It's amazing.
matches and to activate the sidelines and to go to commercial shoots. I've been on multiple commercial shoots with Lionel Messi, standing like 5 feet away from him while he's,
Yep.
taking penalty kicks. I don't know how many soccer fans we have here listening, but it's like being next to Michael Jordan shooting free throws,
That's
standing
incredible.
literally right next to him.
Right.
So dream job to the max. And it was also around soccer, which was the sport that I loved and I'm so
Sure.
passionate about. And I was really happy to be like the only person in the entire office that knew a lick about soccer, which again, right place, right time, right opportunity. You got to capitalize. So
Right.
it all happened. And then, yeah, I mean, I think the time at Gatorade, it was beyond just the iconic brand and the roles, but it was also just the people. And Kyle, it's from working with some of the people there, like the greatest just humans ever, but
Unbelievable.
also some of the most talented marketers ever, where I like look back on the time and just like think about like where are they now?
Yeah.
I mean, the names and the places are ridiculous, not to name drop here, but Morgan Flatley, now global CMO of McDonald's, Kenny Mitchell,
Yeah.
CMO of Levi's, used to be CMO of Snapchat. I mean, it's like we sat next to these people, and it's like they're the best and brightest marketers in the world. And, they were marketing directors, sitting 5 feet away from me when I was there.
Yeah.
And so that just to be around that level of talent not just teaches you about marketing, but what it means to be a great leader, what it means to be a great teammate, what it means to be really competitive and win. And in fact, those traits that I learned from all those people were also traits that I possessed as an athlete growing up that I
Right.
was able to kind of continue to harness. And what's awesome about a place like Gatorade is everyone there, for the most part, is also a former athlete in some way, shape, or form. So it's kind of this shared mentality of we're going to do great work, we're going to win, and we're going to do it together. And that, for me, talk about transition out of sports, it felt like we were still playing a sport
Right.
because, we weren't on the field anymore, but we were doing amazing things all with a shared common goal and whatever cliche you want to throw in there.
Right.
It was true.
Yeah.
So yeah, the experience to have a first job like that at Gatorade, really, I think just catapulted my career.
Yeah. This goes a while back, but I remember at one point you'd made a post on LinkedIn about all of the Gatorade
Yeah,
alumni, and you were
yeah,
like, "Are you serious?" And you like listed probably
yeah,
10 people, and you were like, to your point, Kenny Mitchell, Levi's, or Snapchat, wherever it
yeah.
was at the time.
It goes
But
on.
it's incredible, and I mean, even being a small part of that ecosystem myself years ago, it's you to your point, is the energy and the level of talent and commitment. It was interesting how you just said it was like it was so connected to how it was when you were playing. And I think that even personally for me was what was so enjoyable about it, because it was like the camaraderie that, even the bigger meetings, the annual meetings every year, it was just it was a team.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was a dream place to be to start a career. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people who have left to do incredible things. There's a lot of people who are still there who are still doing incredible things. And for me, like that, the Gatorade team is always family, because I think that's just who they are, and that's why I think the brand continues to have the success that they do.
Yeah. So you talked about, obviously learning so much from the people around you. What was your approach to doing that? Like, what were some of the things that you did early on in your career, where you were able to make sure you were getting the most from those people and that experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's the elements of, again, cliche, but being a sponge, you just got to observe how people approach their everyday, how they, handle themselves in meetings, on calls, how they think about their work, how they push, how they pull, um, how they inspire. And I think, again, for me, I just observed. And as I was observing, I was very rapidly learning. And I think that led me to understand an approach of how, Gatorade does business and how they think about the consumer and marketing and all of these great things. And, I was able to string a lot of these elements together, pieces of the puzzle, and turn that into my own identity there. And I think, again, that just came from building relationships and ultimately earning and establishing trust with, many of the leaders and individuals there who gave me opportunity to do, first of its kind roles, or who trusted me to go manage, these massive multi-million dollar properties, and handle that. And, I think, again, part of that was, my nature, where I was mature enough to do that, but it also came from observation. If it wasn't for being reporting to and being close to Jeff Carney, who's the head of global sports marketing at Gatorade, and watching him interact at first with someone like Lionel Messi's team, that would then have not allowed me to then, when Jeff is not in the conversation, handle myself with Lionel Messi's team.
Right.
And so I think it's just, you take it all in and you then kind of have to spin it and figure out what it's going to mean for you and how to kind of absorb and digest and then turn that into something. And I think that for me is a skill that I know that I possess and that I have. And it's something that I still continue to work on, because I think you're always surrounded by people who you learn from, and you always have to be a continued learner.
Yeah.
But I think, there, especially early on, you kind of just got to be quiet, see what's happening, and then, understand when it's your turn to speak up, and when it is your turn, make the most of it.
Right. All right. So from one iconic brand to the next, what
Yeah.
happens after Gatorade?
Yeah. So Gatorade, dream job. For me, only other dream job, work at Nike. Yeah, again, very rare, very fortunate, very blessed to have this happen. But Nike is the sports brand. It's the most iconic brand on the planet, period, in my opinion. And I always loved Nike, always loved everything about Nike, always loved sneakers, always loved the athletes, always loved every bit of it. And I always wanted to work there. And when I was at Gatorade, this guy, Rami Jabaji, who was my intern mentor when I was an intern at PepsiCo, my junior year of college. He had since left Pepsi to become, different roles at Nike. He was global director for Jordan brand, and then he became global director for Nike football. And him and I stayed in touch. And this, again, was a relationship that I had, and we stayed in touch over the years. And he knew that I had a desire to work there. And Nike's really the place where you kind of have to know someone, which is unfortunate, but it's the reality, just because there's so much interest in every role that pops up there. But you also have to, again, prove that you can be someone who can work there, right? And so he said, just keep killing it at Gatorade, keep doing your thing. When it's the right time, it will happen. And all of a sudden, this role popped up to lead all the digital marketing efforts for U.S. Nike football, which is the NFL, NCAA, football cleats, football apparel, etc. So I went from this job at Gatorade, all things soccer, the sport that I grew up and fell in love playing and did all of that, an iconic brand, Gatorade. And then now I had this opportunity potentially to go run digital for the sport that I played in college. And so the opportunity was there. I ended up getting an offer to go do it. My girlfriend at the time, who would eventually and is become my fiance and is now my wife, we moved out to Portland, Oregon from Chicago. And I started at Nike. And what is insane about Nike is it really is everything that it's cracked up to be. It's an incredible place, and not just for a marketer, but as just a fan of the brand, just to be on the campus and to do all that, it's like you pinch yourself every day. But again, similar to Gatorade, it's surrounded by this incredible level of talent, doing these incredible projects, working on Super Bowls, working on college football playoff, championship games, racing gold Lamborghinis around the streets of San Francisco with Nike swooshes on them, delivering football cleats to unsuspecting consumers with pro NFL players in the driver's seat. Like, again, crazy stuff that only Nike does, right? We did that. True story. And
that's incredible.
Again, to have that be my second job out of school, I always tell people this, and I think it's really true because I mean it. You get a great education, you get a great experience, especially at a place like Penn, as part of your, college life. You go to class, you do all those things, you take tests. But for me, I really got my undergrad degree at Gatorade, and I got my MBA at Nike. No question. And I was at Nike for 2.5 years, living in Portland, got married in Portland. Super special place for me. Was probably there during 2.5 of the hardest years in the last 10 to 15 years for Nike. This is like peak Under Armour. like
Okay.
Cam Newton winning NFL MVP, Jordan
Right.
Spieth like on this insane tear, Steph Curry being the same Steph Curry he is today.
Yeah.
Just like they're crushing it. Adidas like had just partnered with Kanye, like they're taking off, and this is
Yeah.
again 2015 to 2017.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was a trying time. It was really interesting. It was a fun challenge, but again, it was Nike. And I think for me, what was really cool was I look at my time at Gatorade, and I did retail, I did this innovation role, I did sports marketing, I did consumer engagement, and I was doing digital at Nike. And so had a variety of experiences kind of across what I call my marketing kind of tool belt, where I was now starting to be on this track towards being much of like a generalist marketer, as opposed to saying, yeah, you know what, I want to stay in sports marketing. I love Jeff Carney, incredible, human in person. He's, leading global sports market Gatorade. That's like a lifetime role. Like you're a sports marketer at Gatorade
Right.
now. Or people are, social media, and they're all about social, and they do social, and they move from company to company doing social. I never wanted to kind of have a label like that, and wanted to just kind of get critical experiences across a variety of things within marketing. And then to be able to do that at Gatorade and Nike was, again, insane.
Yeah.
Very, very fortunate that was the case. So yeah, was really lucky to do that, and got to work on some iconic projects at Nike, and
Yeah.
bought a lot of sneakers when I was there, some at discount, some full price, some for free, and yeah, had probably too many
Oh,
at the time.
oh, good. So you,
Yeah,
you mentioned some of the culture at Nike, and yourself and other people I've talked to who have worked there. It's like it lives up to the hype.
yeah.
But what what would you say makes someone successful when they're there?
Well, I think it's being able to kind of navigate through the ins and outs of the organization. I mean, it is a very complex structure. It's a very complex, matrix organization, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But I think, despite the fact that at times, Nike is what it is on the outside, they kind of joke internally that many times, inside Nike, kind of acted like the Flintstones, but outside we look like the Jetsons. And, sometimes it is really slow, and it is a lot of red tape, and there is a lot of
Yeah.
layers of approval, and you kind of have to go through all that. And then it creates some iconic thing that, billions of people see, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you have to be, I think, really patient. You have to also capitalize on your moments. And, Nike's changed their structure since my time there. But, when I was there, it was kind of all these different sport categories. So there'd be running and basketball and
Yeah.
training and sportswear and, football, which I was in. And then that ultimately that became field sports after a little while, whereas football, soccer, baseball, and lacrosse. But, at Nike, it's kind of on to the next.
Yeah.
What's 2 weeks after Super Bowl? NBA All-Star game.
Yeah.
You go and you have the most amazing event or activation at Super Bowl. We race gold Lamborghinis through the streets. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, they're launching, the Space Jam, Jordan 10s.
Yeah.
That's at NBA All-Star game. And it's like gets way more media pickup than anything you did at Super Bowl. And it's like, okay, yeah, they're just on to the next.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, again, you have to capitalize on your moments. You have to, I think, be seen there,
Yeah.
and really, again, work super collaboratively and understand that there's a lot of really smart, really creative, really talented people. And everyone, again, has this athlete mentality. Everyone's always pushing each other.
Yeah.
And, you would sometimes take ideas forward to, someone who's a VP or whoever, and they'd be like, that is not good. You got to start over.
Wow.
And so being comfortable with doing that. And the reason why they're saying start over is because whatever feedback they're giving actually ends up making the final product a million times better.
Yeah.
And so I think not having these blinders that like, oh yeah, I work so hard on this and it's so precious to me that I can't take the feedback. It's like any of the feedback that does comes with purpose. And
Right.
so really being able to, digest that and interpret that, and then kind of work collaboratively to spit out whatever's next, is I think something that is a learning curve for some people when they join. But
Yeah.
again, ultimately you see the output that comes from that company. It is what it is, because there's people who are really, really talented doing that work.
Right. It's almost too like, having a level of trust with those people who are making decisions, knowing that they've been there, knowing that they understand. So to your point, receiving the feedback, but also perhaps having to trust that they're pushing for the right reasons
Yeah,
and the work's going to get
100%.
better, to your point.
Yeah, and I think Nike's probably the greatest company in the world, and pushing out ideas that make everybody feel a bit uncomfortable. And so you might be like, is this a good idea? And then, it ends up being an incredible idea that's super disruptive and creates a ton of attention and ultimately gets consumers to care and think about it. And I think Nike, more so than any other company on the planet, really puts the athlete first. And again, having that athlete mindset, I think allows those who are athletes or who understand sport and who understand who Nike's consumer is across the variety of categories that they play in. If you really deeply care about that and you put that first always, then you can be successful.
Yeah. And what did you, because obviously you've gone on to more senior level marketing roles since then. What did you take from those experiences where your work was being critiqued or the work that you put together with the team was critiqued? Like, how did that impact your style in evaluating marketing work in different roles moving forward?
I mean, I think it just elevated, my view on what's good and what's not, or what needs tweaking and, not settling. I think Nike specifically never settles, for just being okay. And sometimes that's really annoying. You would work with someone on the design team and they'd be like,
Yeah.
12.5 font, let's try 13. No, actually, let's do 12. And I'm just, dumbing it down, but like, oh no, let's do 12.5. Oh, actually, let's try 14. No, actually, let's do 12.5. It's 12.5. So you just have to be patient with things like that. But again, they're not settling, they're trying.
Yeah.
They want to make it great. And I think, again, it's probably, especially earlier on, knowing that it was in earlier stages of my career at Nike, I did have some people management responsibility, for the first time. But really, it was really, again, understanding how to be a great teammate, how to be a great leader, how to be, again, have this athlete mentality of wanting to win, but doing so where you're bringing along people with you, to help you, in that process. It was just kind of further validation, again, similar to Gatorade and similar to my time at Penn and similar to my life growing up as an athlete, of kind of things that already inherently existed within me, because you're surrounded by people who have a similar mindset.
Right.
And so I think actually where it's become more tough later stages of my career, where it's been around people who haven't had that same mindset. And that's I think like where now I can really shine as a motivator, as a leader, as someone who can get people to see things differently. That has allowed me to find and inspire people and teams to think at those levels. Whereas, when you're at a place like that, there's probably a lot more consistency in terms of how people are thinking. And sometimes I think, probably more recently, you have to get people to think that way or kind of create that shift for them.
Right. That's super, super interesting. All right. So Nike, pack your bags, decide that you're going to leave
Yeah.
Portland.
Life change. Yeah. Portland, it rains a lot. My
Right.
wife, who was not my wife at the time, we had just recently gotten married in July of 2017. And I think once that happened, it was starting to become, fall, winter in Portland again, where it's just a constant drizzle. We were like, yeah, do we want to spend another winter here? And, we both had this desire to move to Los Angeles. I had some family here. We had, talked about it for a long time, just personally. And I ended up, having a former Nike colleague recruit me down to LA, to this new kind of brand partnerships role at Fox Sports. So another iconic, sports company, obviously a massive media conglomerate, very different again from other things that I had done. Now this was media and brand partnerships. So again, more experience across kind of the tool belt.
Yeah.
Really, again, really interesting to be able to experience that. Probably for the first time that out of any of the other, experience that I had at Nike or Gatorade, I realized that I did not like what I was doing. I did not like being exclusively in the media role. The role that I was in was essentially basically working as an internal creative agency for the ad sales team at Fox. And so these big companies like a Coke or, a Wendy's or a Home Depot would come to Fox, and they would also go to ESPN. They would also go to Bleacher Report, whoever it was.
Yeah.
They would say, yeah, here's a bunch of money to run TV commercials. What else can you give us? And so we would come up with these ideas to integrate their products or messaging into Fox Sports programming. So I was responsible for the studio shows, like Undisputed, formerly with Skip and Shannon, or the Colin Cowherd show, as well as all the Fox Sports kind of digital properties. So a lot of the social content they were running or other things to find creative ways to integrate the brands basically as sponsors of that content, but it was never about sponsorship. It was more around integration. So you didn't want to just see as like, yeah, this is an ad that you're seeing. It was more around like, yeah, now it's time for the Casper mattress sleeper pick of the week. Ideas like that. Sure, you could slap a sticker on it when it's like the Wendy's halftime show or whatever it is, but it was coming up with some of those creative ideas. But interesting enough, my third day at Fox was when Disney actually announced the acquisition of Fox. So that was an interesting way to move right to LA, pack up our bags from this, amazing job at Nike, and then kind of have that entire time I was there be pretty tumultuous, be pretty competitive around who's going to Disney, who's staying with Fox, yada yada yada. And then, I held out. I did it. I learned a lot about media and how brands think about media and RFPs. And, I got to work with some of these, great brands and kind of was experienced a different side, the ad sales side of a media business. Again, realized it wasn't for me, but it was great to get some experience there. And then ended up getting recruited. This executive recruiting firm reached out to me to be the first ever VP of brand marketing for Ticketmaster. So part of Live Nation, Ticketmaster, of course, doing all the tickets for sporting events, concerts, you name it. So it still got to be within my sports, kind of niche that existed. But I think what's funny about the term brand and Ticketmaster, it's kind of like an oxymoron because Ticketmaster, honestly, is probably one of the most hated brands on the planet. If anyone's seen the Taylor Swift news, recently, or any news really around fees and transparency and all of that. I was brought in to kind of shift some perception around that. And so now this was a VP role, kind of more of an executive type role, leveraging the experience that I had elsewhere to kind of play up this more emotive side, which again is everything is emotive at Nike and a Gatorade. I'm around going to a concert or going to a sporting event and to kind of take the view off of the fees and, make it about this experience that's a lifelong memory, essentially. And, starting to build out a team. We bring in a new creative agency. It's February of 2020. We're really kicking things off. And then COVID happens, March of 2020. And live events, arguably one of the worst industries you could possibly be in. And so my wife is 6 months pregnant at the time. We kind of hang around, Ticketmaster through COVID. I helped steer the company alongside others, all the way up through Michael Rapino, the CEO of Live Nation, around the messaging, around the mass cancellation of all these events and the refunds. And it was not fun. It was not fun at all. And again, the stress of like first kid on the way and we can't even leave our house. It was nuts for everybody. Right. And I end up getting, we have the baby and then like a week after I'm set to come back, I end up getting furloughed along with 90% of the rest of the company. And I knew at that point I wasn't going to go back, and that I kind of wanted to do something different. And so I ended up just taking, 5 months off to be a dad, which was really lucky that I was able to do that and had the time to do that. And it was the best, thing ever to be able to do that, especially during COVID when, who knew what was going to happen. And then, when I was really starting to try to figure out what was next for me, for the first time in my career, I wanted to kind of be selfish with what was next. And I wanted to be kind of the one who was reaching out and try to be aggressive and finding my, perfect fit and perfect role. And so I just wrote down this list of criteria of what it was that I wanted. And that essentially was I wanted to be working at a brand that was marketing a consumer product again, because I had that at Nike and Gatorade, but I missed that at Fox and at Live Nation. I wanted to be somewhere way smaller than I had ever been because I had been at these like Fortune 50 companies. And I wanted to maybe test out startup environment a little bit where I could have real ownership of every idea and every decision. I wanted to be doing something within the health and wellness space. Again, maybe that's like a COVID light bulb, but also just like a huge passion of mine has kind of always been like health, wellness, sports, culture, lifestyle, and technology. So if it could hit some of those boxes and that criteria would be interesting. And then, ideally it was somewhere, local in Southern California. And the first company that came to mind for me was Hyperice. And if anyone's not familiar with Hyperice, you might be familiar with Hyperice's main competitor, Therabody, who makes the Theragun. Hyperice makes the Hypervolt massage gun and the Normatec, air compression boots and a lot of products for, recovery for athletes. And they had just signed a deal with the NFL to be the exclusive partner of the NFL. they had all of this and crazy investors like LeBron James and Naomi Osaka and Patrick Mahomes and these iconic athletes, and they're making a ton of noise. Their products actually were at Nike World Headquarters and like all of the gyms, so I kind of knew about the products. And I somehow weaseled my way into getting in touch with the CEO. He didn't respond to my LinkedIn messages, but I had to like find a mutual contact who then like reached out, and he responded finally to an email. We have a conversation, we hit it off. I talked to the founder of Hyperice like a week later. We have a conversation, we hit it off. And then 3-4 weeks later, they're creating a role for me to be their first ever global head of marketing. And that role at Hyperice was truly like the most transformational role of my entire career, because it was a perfect culmination of every single thing that I did at every company that I had been at. It was a little bit of Gatorade, a little bit of Nike, a little bit of Fox, a little bit of Live Nation. Also new uncharted territory for me. It's kind of a startup space and high growth and performance marketing and all these different things. And it was incredible. We signed every partner on the planet, basically, deals with, the other ones I said, but the NBA, Peloton instructor, we signed deals with, all these different athletes, all these different global sporting icons. We were expanding our retail footprint, not just on Hyperice.com, their direct business, and Amazon, but also in Best Buy and all these different retail doors. And I feel really fortunate that I was able to, help steer the brand through like this tremendous period of growth. We were named one of Fast Company's most innovative companies in the world in 2021. We completely relaunched that brand when I was there. It's been a brand that had been around for about 10 years, and that's an incredible story for anyone to read up on. I'm sure if you Google Hyperice and Anthony Katz, you could find it. But the origins of that company with Kobe Bryant, and the rationale for the company being called Hyperice, because Anthony was working with Kobe, and Kobe's Nike shoe at the time was the Hyper Dunk. And Anthony didn't have anything better to name the company, so he called it Hyperice because the first
Oh,
product was
wow.
the ice compression sleeve.
Yeah.
So yeah, great origin story. But
Yeah.
I've been around for 10 years, and again, the world was changing with COVID. People were kind of getting more into the mental health side. It was less around just being these tools for elite athletes, because great for elite athletes, but people were stuck at home. It was great if you could even like go out for a run, or for me, I was like chasing my newborn around and hurting my back.
Yeah.
So there was this kind of shift around being less of a brand for elite athletes and more of a brand for kind of everyday people, anyone on earth, right, who just wants to move. And so they had this whole thing around, forget if you're trying to run a 6-minute mile, what if you just want to go for a 6-minute run, period.
Yeah.
And that kind of led this massive shift as part of a rebrand that I led to be seen as more of a holistic high performance wellness brand that went just beyond the physical, but it also included the mental health aspect of it, and was a really transformational thing, I think, for that company and for that brand. And was able to lead a team of 20 plus incredible individuals around the globe. Had a team member in China, had a couple of teammates in Europe, across kind of all facets of marketing, all these different things that I led. I was reporting directly to Hyperice's CEO, and it was again another kind of dream job. Similar in many ways to the Gatorade and Nike, just kind of being close to the athlete and being able to kind of really push and take a lot of the things specifically I think I learned there, and really translate that to the Hyperice kind of ecosystem and consumer and product and environment, was incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was again, I think, a really good kind of summary of where I had been leading into this role, and then ultimately what catapulted me after that.
Right, right. I thought it was interesting what you were saying, is because, at that point you've got a great resume between, your collegiate background at Penn, great university, you've got Gatorade, you've got Nike, but you didn't rest on your laurels. You said, this is what I want. And like you said, you were pinging people on LinkedIn, you were making the right connections. Like
Yeah.
you didn't wait for it to come to you. You figured out what you wanted and you went for it. And I think for the audience listening, that's a really important lesson.
Yeah, totally. And I think, when you have a child, and then you have, an unfortunate job loss, given the circumstances of COVID,
Right.
you kind of have to be aggressive just out of nature. So I
Right.
think like environment caused that too.
Sure.
But I also saw that, you know, I had to get after it and go for it.
Yeah.
Like for all of us, like, you have to have like some level of self motivation to be able to go and do those things.
Right.
And I've felt fortunate to have the experience that I did, and that I could, stack my resume up against, anyone for that. But,
Yeah.
again, the role at Hyperice didn't exist.
Yeah.
That was created. And so it was good timing because they were kind of starting to think about someone to lead marketing, but they didn't really they didn't put together a job description. There wasn't any of that.
Yeah.
It was just the right conversation, capitalizing on it, probably a
Right.
bit of luck, a lot of hard work to get the conversation, but also
Yeah.
the body of work, prior to that to be able to allow me to even have the conversation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was, it all kind of worked out and the stars aligned.
Right. Right on. And then
Yeah,
what
and then
comes
after
next
that,
after Hyperice?
I never thought I was going to leave Hyperice, and then I got a call from actually the same exact executive recruiting firm that placed me in my role at Live Nation, about this opportunity in a completely different industry, actually in smart home,
Mm.
with this startup, Silicon Valley-based startup that was founded by two former Apple executives who both happen to work under Steve Jobs and helped launch the iPhone. And when you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, I'll take the call. So I took the call, got on the phone with the CEO of Level Home, and his name is John Martin, and he says to me, kind of look at your resume, and I'd label you as a sports guy.
Mm.
And, like I said earlier, I didn't really like labels because I didn't want to be seen as, oh yeah, he's a sports marketing guy. He's
Yeah.
a, this or that or retail, whatever it was.
Right.
And I was like, well, yeah, you're right. Every brand I've worked with has had some adjacency to sports, but
Yeah.
that can translate anywhere. And again, talk about adjacency to sports, that's a huge positive in my eyes
Yeah.
because, again, how to be a great teammate, how to be super competitive, have
Yeah.
this desire to win, all of that. So whether you're working with, LeBron or Leo Messi, or you're, doing anything else, like you can still have this athlete mentality and sport mentality wherever it was.
Yeah.
And so, well, why don't you try something different? Come help us out. We're doing some interesting things in the smart home space. The company's actually in the business of making a smart door lock. And so, I decided to take a huge risk,
Yeah.
leaving an incredible role at Hyperice,
Yeah.
incredible team, incredible leadership, all of that, and go into a new category and kind of prove that I could do it elsewhere. And it's been really successful in that role. The team has grown. The company, has kind of, I think, entered some new territory. We've shifted the focus in terms of how to approach marketing, playing up some more of the emotive aspects of home entry versus just being around the ins and outs of the technicalities of what the lock does and it doesn't do. Where ultimately it's certainly about the product, but it goes beyond the product and it's actually what it literally unlocks for you.
Yeah.
And so a lot of just shifts that again, kind of taking from the emotive aspect of some of my prior experiences elsewhere,
Yeah.
really, I think, allowed me to have success in a different industry and a different role. I think for me, no matter what, which always holds true, is, my passions, like I said earlier, health, wellness, lifestyle, sports, culture, technology. And to have the entire body of work in my career to check those boxes, sometimes more than others, probably in this role, really only checks the technology box. Others checked every box. Hyperice probably checked every one because it is
Right.
a technology-esque product. And I think, again, that's just allowed me to, I think, really put my full self into my work because I've been able to marry my passion with my work. And I think whenever that's the case, it makes the output that much stronger. So
Yeah.
again, realize, really fortunate in my career to be able to do that,
Yeah.
to have the opportunity to do that, and to kind of have some really positive momentum, throughout my career, and that really stemmed from, early days as an athlete and at
Yeah.
school all the way until now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Nice. So you might have to fact check me on this one, but there's a quote from another podcast that you were on that resonated with me, and you were talking about your move to Level Home, but you said, "I'm going to take a bet on me."
Hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe tell me a little bit about that mindset.
Yeah. I think, when I was at Hyperice, in many ways, I felt like I was, kind of running a similar playbook to what I ran at Nike and Gatorade, or at least what I observed at Nike and Gatorade. And I think when you enter in a new category that really gets you outside of your comfort zone, you are taking a risk. You are placing a bet. You
Yeah.
got to figure out if it's going to, really kind of work or ring true or not. And also what level you can, persuade leadership to, be able to do, think differently or have new ideas. And it really was the ultimate bet because again, I was leaving something that I was really comfortable in. And so, I think what that taught me though was, not to be afraid of some level of risk.
Right.
And I think what is interesting is that no matter what, as I was thinking about the move, I had all these relationships with different people and, that I could kind of go and consult of like, hey, is this a good move for me? What do you think about this? And I think I've also said it before in other places, but, I think it's really important for everyone to have their own personal board of directors.
Mm,
And, that's people that, can kind of be on your team and they can be friends, they can be family, they could be former colleagues, they could be people you reported to, they could be people, who reported to you.
yeah.
But to be able to go to those people and say, hey, what do you think about this? And so, whether that's, anyone from Gatorade or Nike or,
Right.
an uncle, whoever it might be,
Yeah.
being able to go and do that and to have that advisement, it wasn't a decision that I just, made quickly. It came with a lot of thought and I think
Yeah.
a lot of calculated risk to
Right.
be able to do that. But yeah, it was totally placing a bet.
Yeah. Love the board of directors. So how and when do you leverage that network?
Well, I think, you know, do treat others as you want to be treated, right? And
Yeah.
so I think, I've been able to maintain really good relationships. I've also now become that mentor to others,
Right.
just like I have mentors who do the same. And I think it kind of just becomes a thing where, if you have it and it's genuine, and you treat people with respect and you know that they can give you advice and you're going to trust it and they're also going to give you feedback and you're willing to hear it, then it can be something that's a really interesting kind of shared two-way conversation.
Yeah.
And so for me, it could be as simple as a text message. It could be as simple as a phone call. It could be as crazy as a cold LinkedIn message for someone that I haven't talked to in 7 years. Um, and I think what I see too is that when you least expect it, sometimes like people will reach out to you and it could ultimately, change or get you to think about things differently.
Yeah.
There's an incredible leader from Nike who was the GM most recently of um, Jordan, the women's division for Jordan brand, and prior to that was GM for North America soccer at Nike. She's now at Sony, and she reached out to me on LinkedIn. I haven't talked to her since 2017. She reached out to me on LinkedIn. She's like a SVP at Sony, super high up. She's
Yeah.
incredible. And she reached out to me on LinkedIn probably about a month ago, out of nowhere, and said, hey, Andrew, I was just looking back through some of my old files and saw this like thank you note that you sent me right before you left Nike. I've always been like such a big fan of yours. It's really been really great to like
Wow.
see your career progression. Like, would be awesome to catch up sometime. Like, wishing you all the best. Like out of nowhere.
Wow.
And that all came from like me just being appreciative of her
Right.
during my time there and seeing her leadership style, the way that she cared about people. And clearly that's genuine because she still does care about people.
Yeah.
And so just again, the people, I can't stress that enough, like seeing those things and trying to emulate those things and also seeing some of the bad things and not doing those things
Yeah.
is so important. And I think for me, again, that goes back to this whole thing around being an athlete, not just as like a captain or a leader, but also like as a coach, as a player. Like you got to take all of these different elements and all of these outputs and then, ultimately transform that into, your own thing. But if you put it out there, it will come. And I think just being really appreciative for the people and the work and having respect for it, has always been kind of my mantra. And then, you see the fruits of that, no matter if it's 6 years later, or maybe something, will happen next week, or, just like you and I, we haven't connected in
Yeah.
what, 11, 12 years. And,
Yep.
here we are
Here we
again.
are.
So
Yeah.
yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. That's great. So you've been incredibly generous with your time. I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
And that is when you think about a lot of the younger talent in the, the last few organizations that you've worked for. So think, people, 1 to 3 years out of, college or whatever it may be, college or not college. For those that are excelling and that have done well, what are they doing right?
Well, I often say it's something that's really hard to define and kind of articulate what it is, but I think you can kind of just immediately tell, or at least I can, even in interviews, within the first 10 to 15 seconds if someone just gets it. And again, I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but you can just usually tell. And I think that's, kind of this level of really good intelligence, but also emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
I think it's, again, understanding how to have a level of quiet confidence. I think it's really putting their head down and doing work. Also asking a lot of questions, but asking smart questions. It's being able to take feedback, and it's also understanding when to speak up and when to really voice opinion, because their opinion matters a lot. And even if it doesn't feel like it, it does. And so make your voice heard.
Right.
And I think that, again, comes from, especially for many people that are probably listening, this athlete mentality. You got to have that. You got to, continue that. I don't think anyone shied away from competition, when they're playing. So why shy away from anything in a professional working environment? Doing so, of course, with respect, and that comes with, just like it did then, respect for your opponent, respect for the game, and you gotta carry that forward. So yeah, I always say people with the it factor, you can kind of just tell, and I think it really has a lot of those criteria that I listed.
Yeah. Nice. Can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. So
Yeah, thank you for
appreciative.
having me. Of
And
course.
it's been great to catch up.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Kyle.
Take care,
Appreciate
Andrew.
it. Okay.
You got it. Hey everyone, it's Kyle. Thanks so much for listening. I truly believe that every story can make a difference for this next generation of retiring athletes. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or give us a follow if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.